At the edge of this ruined sanctuary, Elizabeth Wells knelt on mud-slicked earth, hands shaking, eyes swollen from grief. Her black mourning dress clung heavily, rain saturating fabric and skin alike, blending her tears seamlessly into the storm. Before her, freshly disturbed soil marked the grave of Ben Wells, deputy, husband, protector, whose young life ended abruptly beneath an outlaw's bullet. Elizabeth clutched tightly the rusted revolver Ben always carried, a futile gesture of defiance against the cruelty of fate. The scent of damp earth and smoldering wood filled her lungs, bitterness forming a knot in her chest. She whispered softly through trembling lips, "Justice will find you, Ben, I promise." A sudden noise pierced the relentless downpour, snapping Elizabeth from sorrowful reflection, a distant thunder unlike any from the sky. Horses. Instinctively, Elizabeth turned her gaze toward the open prairie. The dim silhouettes of riders appeared, vague at first but growing sharper with each heartbeat. Her pulse quickened, dread coiling tight inside her chest. In moments, shadows became men, hard men, ruthless men. Leading them rode Jasper Kane, face marred by cruelty and a jagged scar stretching from cheekbone to jawline, eyes devoid of compassion. Elizabeth's fingers tightened desperately around the revolver, her knuckles bone-white with determination. "Look what we got here," Jasper sneered as he halted mere yards from her husband's grave, his voice chillingly calm amidst the roaring storm. "Widow Wells mourning her dead Lawman. Reckon he ain't much use to you now, is he?" Elizabeth stood slowly, rainwater streaming down her resolute face. Weapon gripped fiercely, aimed shakily at Kane's chest. Her voice trembled, yet carried unmistakable strength. "You murdered an innocent man. Leave now or you'll regret this." The outlaw chuckled darkly, dismounting with menacing ease, his boots sinking into the sodden ground. His eyes sparkled with malicious amusement as he stalked forward, undaunted by the trembling weapon aimed directly at his heart. "Ain't your man buried right there proof enough, little lady?" he mocked, stepping closer. Elizabeth's finger twitched on the trigger, heart hammering as Kane's cold gaze bore into hers. In a heartbeat, Jasper lunged forward, hand swift as lightning, wrenching the revolver from her grasp. Elizabeth stumbled backward, barely catching herself on the grave marker, gasping in disbelief and fury. "Take her!" Jasper barked to his men, motioning dismissively toward Elizabeth as though she were livestock. She struggled fiercely, fists flying against strong hands binding her wrists with rough rope. Screams of anger echoed futilely through the tempest, drowned by thunder and laughter as the men cruelly dragged her toward their horses. Elizabeth's eyes desperately scanned her ruined home, seeking one last fragment of strength before captivity. Then she remembered Ben's badge, his symbol of justice, hidden beneath loose floorboards mere hours earlier. It was her secret now, her last defiance. As rough hands forced Elizabeth onto a horse, Jasper paused, turning his gaze back toward the charred homestead. "Burn whatever's left," he commanded coldly, his voice empty of remorse. Elizabeth's anguished scream pierced the night as flames roared anew, consuming the last remnants of the life she'd known. Far beyond the flames' glow, cloaked in rain and shadow, eyes keenly observed the riders vanishing into the darkness. Takota, a Cheyenne warrior whose quiet presence seemed carved from the rugged wilderness itself, studied the burning homestead intently. Dark eyes reflected firelight, revealing subtle grief behind fierce determination. His broad shoulders, scarred from countless battles, shifted beneath rain-drenched buckskin. Beside him, fellow warriors waited in disciplined silence, their solemn expressions masked by stoic calm. Takota knelt, tracing tracks deeply imprinted into the mud. He recognized them immediately. Jasper Kane's brutal gang, murderers, thieves, defilers of land and honor alike. Each track fueled his internal conflict, blending memories of past wounds suffered by his people with unspoken obligations demanding retribution. The winds howled fiercely, whispering warnings from ancestors unseen yet deeply felt. One warrior stepped forward cautiously. "Takota," he murmured softly. "The white woman, they have taken her prisoner. Do we intervene?" Takota rose slowly, allowing silence to build tension before he spoke deliberately, voice calm yet layered with quiet intensity. "They have brought suffering to many, Cheyenne and white alike. This woman may yet have purpose in our hunt. His gaze drifted to distant hills, pondering unseen consequences woven within every choice. The warrior nodded gravely, stepping back respectfully. Takota hesitated momentarily, eyes lingering on the smoldering ruins of Elizabeth's life. There, silhouetted against a sky alight with flames, he silently made an unspoken promise. Justice would indeed come, swift and relentless as thunder itself. Miles away, Elizabeth rode captive through punishing darkness, wrists raw from bindings that chafed mercilessly. Each mile dragged her further from memories now bitter-sweetened by sorrow and betrayal. Yet even amidst relentless despair, defiance kindled stubbornly within her spirit. She silently vowed that these men, Jasper Kane especially, would never break her. She glanced skyward, rain pelting her exhausted face, seeking strength from stars hidden by storm clouds. Unseen but profoundly felt, hope whispered gently in darkness. Her suffering would find purpose. Elizabeth drew breath deeply, resolved to endure whatever trials lay ahead, driven by a promise forged on blood and tears beside Ben's grave. Somewhere deep within Wyoming's wilderness, two souls, one white, grieving yet fiercely defiant, one Cheyenne, hardened by loss yet honorable beyond doubt, moved inevitably toward each other, propelled by intertwined fates and shared enemies. Lightning flared brightly, illuminating briefly a landscape carved by danger, suffering, and uncertain promise. Elizabeth Wells' story was only beginning, her greatest trials and fiercest allies yet hidden by shadows cast beneath storm-darkened skies. Elizabeth's wrists burned fiercely beneath the coarse ropes, each jolting step of her captor's horse sending fresh waves of agony coursing through her arms. Dawn was rising pale and cold over the Wyoming wilderness, painting the landscape in ghostly hues of gray. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion yet sharpened by simmering defiance, scanned the rugged terrain for any sign of escape. Jasper Kane rode ahead, face hardened into stone-like indifference. Elizabeth's presence meant nothing more to him than bait, an object to draw out lawmen or warriors foolish enough to chase ghosts through dangerous country. As morning broke fully, Jasper signaled a halt near a stream shaded by ancient cottonwoods. Elizabeth was roughly dragged from the saddle, collapsing onto the damp earth with a suppressed gasp. Her limbs, numb and stiffened from hours of relentless travel, struggled to regain feeling. She fought a wave of dizziness, determined not to show vulnerability before her tormentors. Jasper loomed over her, sneering with casual cruelty. "You try running again," he warned coldly, nudging her sharply with his boot, "and you'll never see sunrise again." Elizabeth raised her eyes defiantly, biting back a fierce retort. Jasper laughed harshly, turning away to bark orders at his men, ignoring her furious glare. Yet behind the outward bravado, Elizabeth knew the bitter truth. Escape meant near certain death in an unforgiving wilderness, but captivity was slow poison, eroding spirit and strength. When the outlaws busied themselves by the stream, Elizabeth studied her surroundings carefully, noting the dense thickets and shadowy ridgelines. She recalled vividly her husband's quiet lessons, guidance on wilderness survival, taught gently, never expecting her to need them. Her heart twisted painfully at memories of Ben, igniting fresh resolve. She must survive, if only to honor the strength he had instilled within her. A sudden burst of shouting among Jasper's men seized Elizabeth's attention. Through their noise, she heard a whisper of movement, subtle, barely audible, the shifting of leaves betrayed by some unseen presence. Elizabeth's pulse quickened instinctively. Jasper, suspiciously alert, demanded silence with a raised hand. Eyes narrowed. The outlaws drew weapons, tension thickening the air. An arrow flew silently from the shadows, striking one outlaw cleanly through the chest. Chaos erupted instantly. Gunfire shattered the morning stillness, men shouting, scattering for cover. Elizabeth, forgotten momentarily, seized the opportunity. Fighting the agony in her wrists, she crawled frantically toward the dense underbrush, dirt clinging to her battered dress. Bullets whizzed perilously overhead, forcing her heart into panic rhythm. Hidden within tangled branches, she pressed herself flat against the earth, breath shallow, praying fervently for invisibility. Gradually, the cacophony faded, leaving silence heavy with menace. Elizabeth dared a cautious glance toward the campsite, witnessing Jasper and surviving men retreat swiftly, abandoning gear and casualties alike. Her heart leapt desperately at this fragile opportunity. Ignoring pain and fear, she sprinted deeper into the wilderness, guided only by instinctive hope. Hours passed in relentless flight, yet each step weakened Elizabeth further. Hunger clawed at her stomach. Dehydration blurred her vision, each stride an increasing burden. Eventually, she collapsed onto rocky ground, limbs shaking uncontrollably. Tears of despair mingled bitterly with dust upon her cheeks. She lifted eyes toward an indifferent sky, whispering prayers between ragged breaths. Movement again stirred nearby. Elizabeth's breath froze in terror, anticipating Jasper's men had returned to finish their cruel work. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her gaze toward the sound, confronting instead the figure of a solitary Cheyenne warrior, poised silently, arrow drawn, eyes dark with wary intensity. Elizabeth's heart stilled, fear gripping her throat. Yet as she stared into his unwavering gaze, she sensed no immediate threat. Only guarded curiosity mingled with stern appraisal. He approached cautiously, movements fluid yet controlled, embodying power tempered by restraint. Elizabeth remained motionless, acutely aware of vulnerability yet oddly unafraid. He paused mere feet away, bow lowered slightly, deep eyes probing her with silent inquiry. After a moment, the warrior gestured briefly toward her battered wrists, indicating he intended no harm. Elizabeth hesitated, memories of violence committed by outlaws blurring perceptions of trust and danger alike. But something deep within his solemn gaze spoke quietly of honor, integrity, and perhaps, unlikely as it seemed, even understanding. With painful slowness, Elizabeth extended her bound wrists toward him. Without words, the warrior drew a knife, its blade gleaming sharply in sunlight. Fear tightened again briefly in her chest, but his gentle movements quickly banished doubt. With practiced skill, he severed the ropes that imprisoned her, carefully avoiding further harm to bruised skin. Relief flooded Elizabeth's exhausted body, tears welling unbidden, expressing gratitude words could never match. The warrior watched him passively, yet subtle compassion softened his hardened features. He stepped back respectfully, offering a quiet nod, allowing Elizabeth space to reclaim strength and dignity. With steadying breaths, Elizabeth found courage enough to speak softly, voice trembling yet resilient. "Thank you for my freedom." He merely inclined his head slightly, silent yet conveying deep acknowledgement of her struggle. Elizabeth hesitated, countless questions battling uncertainty within her mind. She recognized a fierce dignity radiating from the stranger, so unlike any she'd known before, neither enemy nor obvious ally. She found herself inexplicably drawn toward trust, despite every reason to remain wary. What do I call you?" she ventured carefully, words quiet and respectful. The warrior met her eyes directly, momentarily allowing vulnerability through stoicism. His deep voice, when it finally emerged, carried quiet authority tempered with gentle caution. "Takota," the name resonated deeply within her spirit, inexplicably comforting despite all unknowns stretching between them. Elizabeth offered her own name softly, returning trust cautiously yet sincerely. Before either could speak further, distant hoofbeats thundered ominously upon the horizon, swiftly eroding brief serenity. Takota's expression darkened instantly. He recognized clearly the riders approaching fast and mercilessly. "Follow," he commanded succinctly, urgency clear within restrained speech. Elizabeth stood quickly, heart racing as newfound allies fled swiftly together into shadows cast by ancient trees. Paths once separate now entwined inexorably by shared dangers and silent promises unspoken. Neither Elizabeth nor Takota looked back. Survival depended solely on trust yet to be tested fully by darkness ahead. Elizabeth followed Takota deeper into the rugged wilderness, each step echoing painfully through her aching limbs, yet fueled by adrenaline and determination. Silence hung thickly between them, tense yet strangely comforting, filled with mutual curiosity and an unspoken sense of respect. Elizabeth sensed the depth behind Takota's quiet demeanor, a man shaped by unseen scars, guided by honor more profound than words could express. Each glance exchanged was measured, subtly communicating more clearly than mere speech. The distant echoes of pursuing hoofbeats gradually faded, replaced by the eerie quiet of the forest. Ancient pines stood sentinel around them, the cool shadows offering temporary refuge. Takota moved gracefully yet purposefully, his steps as silent as the falling leaves, each movement deliberate and poised. Elizabeth matched his pace, determined not to slow him down despite exhaustion gnawing at her bones. Suddenly, Takota stopped, crouching silently at the base of a rocky outcropping. Elizabeth immediately mirrored his action, heart racing as he gestured toward the open clearing ahead. 2 riders emerged, Jasper's men, heavily armed and scouring the terrain intently. Elizabeth's breath caught painfully in her chest. Memories of captivity surged forth, fierce yet paralyzing. Takota turned slowly toward her, his deep, steady eyes holding hers firmly. He raised a finger to his lips, signaling absolute silence, his gaze conveying calm authority and reassurance. Elizabeth nodded faintly, trusting implicitly his unspoken promise of safety. She watched anxiously as he drew an arrow, silently fitting it to his bow, tension tightening the muscles of his powerful arms. The riders dismounted, weapons raised cautiously as they examined fresh tracks left by Elizabeth and Takota. Elizabeth's heartbeat thundered, certain discovery imminent. Her eyes widened in fear and fury when she recognized one of Jasper's trusted lieutenants, his cruel laughter still echoing in her memories. Hatred welled intensely within her heart, tempered only by the steadiness of Takota's presence beside her. With astonishing precision, Takota released his arrow, piercing the lieutenant through the heart. He collapsed instantly, shock etched permanently across lifeless features. Chaos ensued swiftly as the second rider fired wildly into surrounding trees. Takota, seemingly unaffected by the violent panic, emerged silently from hiding. With brutal yet efficient grace, he engaged the outlaw in fierce combat, movement swift, decisive, unyielding. Elizabeth watched breathlessly, torn between horror and admiration. Each strike with controlled power, fierce yet restrained, guided by calculated intention rather than reckless rage. Moments later, Takota stood victorious, blood streaking his arms and face, breathing steadily yet deeply. Elizabeth rose slowly, approaching cautiously, her admiration and gratitude mingled deeply with lingering shock. Takota silently wiped his blade clean, his gaze meeting Elizabeth's briefly. "They will send others," he murmured gravely, eyes searching the horizon thoughtfully. Elizabeth understood immediately. Their enemy's resolve would only intensify. She shivered involuntarily, wrapping her arms protectively around herself, aware more than ever how vulnerable she'd become, despite newfound strength. Takota led her quietly onward, eventually reaching shelter beneath overhanging rocks near a rushing mountain stream. Elizabeth sank wearily onto moss-covered stones, her body trembling from exertion and lingering fear. Takota moved silently nearby, gathering dry wood and kindling flames with practiced ease. Soon, warmth penetrated the chilling twilight, the fire's gentle crackles softening tension between them. In the soft glow, Elizabeth studied Takota carefully. His face bore shadows of sorrow beneath quiet resilience, secrets hinted at but not shared. Courage rose slowly within her chest, prompting her to break the respectful silence. "You fight like someone who's lost something precious," she whispered gently, hesitant yet compelled by empathy. Takota glanced upward sharply, eyes briefly revealing deep vulnerability before reclaiming quiet reserve. His voice emerged softly, burdened yet strong. "Much has been lost," he admitted quietly, carefully choosing words. "The outlaws took family. Honor demands justice." Elizabeth nodded solemnly, recognizing intimately grief reflected clearly within his guarded expression. Shared sorrow bridged differences, forming bonds stronger than mere alliances forged by convenience. Their eyes met deeply, mutual understanding dawning profoundly yet silently. Hours passed quietly as shadows lengthened and stars emerged faintly overhead. Elizabeth felt fatigue pulling heavily at her eyelids, yet refused to surrender completely. Her thoughts drifted toward Ben, aching grief softened by unexpected gratitude for Takota's steadfast protection. She found comfort in the quiet dignity he radiated, grounding her restless spirit amid overwhelming turmoil. Suddenly, Distant gunshots shattered their fragile peace, echoing ominously through darkness. Takota's posture stiffened instantly, his expression darkening perceptibly. Elizabeth's heart sank desperately. Jasper Kane's men were closing rapidly, driven relentlessly by vengeance and malice. Takota rose swiftly, extinguishing their fire with a purposeful intensity. "We cannot outrun forever," he stated firmly, turning solemnly toward Elizabeth. His gaze held hers with unwavering resolve. "Together we must fight." Elizabeth stood slowly, dread interwoven fiercely with determination. "I won't let them take me again," she whispered resolutely, voice trembling yet unyielding. Takota's expression softened subtly, respect deepening in his eyes. "You are stronger than you know," he affirmed quietly, sincerity resonating clearly within each word. Guided by starlight and mutual resolve, Elizabeth and Takota prepared silently, strategizing instinctively rather than verbally. Each gesture communicated volumes, trust strengthening profoundly amidst approaching danger. Elizabeth's fingers curled around a discarded rifle, heart steadying beneath a newfound purpose fueled by grief, loyalty, and quiet courage. The sound of riders intensified, hoofbeats growing rapidly louder, echoing cruelly off rocky hillsides. Elizabeth glanced sideways at Takota, finding reassurance within his steady gaze. Unspoken promises passed between them, cementing bonds forged irrevocably through hardship and bloodshed. Elizabeth understood clearly now. Strength was not merely enduring suffering, but choosing courage even amidst overwhelming despair. She stood shoulder to shoulder beside Takota, facing darkness unflinchingly, prepared finally to fight fiercely for survival, honor, and justice. Together, beneath the cold Wyoming stars, Elizabeth and Takota awaited their enemy's inevitable arrival, allies now bound inseparably by blood spilled, pain endured, and silent trust rooted firmly within shared wounds and profound understanding. Elizabeth's pulse quickened as Jasper Kane and his outlaws thundered closer, their violent intent palpable, shattering the silent tension that gripped the night. She steadied her trembling hands around the rifle, memories of Ben's lifeless body mingling sharply with newfound courage. Beside her, Takota stood resolute, face illuminated faintly by starlight, unwavering in his calm determination. She drew strength from his presence, trusting him implicitly now, bound not only by shared danger, but by mutual understanding and respect born from suffering. Within moments, the outlaws burst into view, horses skidding to abrupt halts, eyes glittering cruelly in torchlight. Jasper dismounted slowly, deliberate menace etched deep into his scarred features. "You've caused enough trouble, widow," Jasper growled, voice dripping venom, his gaze briefly flickering toward Takota with contemptuous hatred. "Step away from that savage now, or you'll regret it." Elizabeth's voice emerged, fierce yet steady, defiance overcoming lingering fear. "Your threats don't control me anymore, Jasper. You took everything from me once. I won't let you do it again." Jasper laughed harshly, signaling sharply. His men surged forward, guns drawn, violence erupting explosively. Bullets flew wildly, splintering trees, sending bursts of soil skyward. Takota moved swiftly, blending seamlessly into darkness, arrows slicing silently through shadows, striking true and deadly. Elizabeth fired the rifle instinctively, heart hammering, emotions fueling every shot. This battle was not merely survival. It was redemption, justice earned through bloodshed. Combat swirled chaotically, brutal yet vividly clear beneath stars coldly indifferent. Takota's warriors, hidden earlier, suddenly emerged from shadows, turning the ambush decisively in their favor. Elizabeth marveled at their disciplined courage, warriors moving like phantoms through chaos, striking enemies swiftly, honoring silent codes of justice. Through the smoke, Jasper spotted Elizabeth, eyes blazing fiercely. He lunged toward her, knife drawn, hatred contorting his face grotesquely. Elizabeth stumbled backward, heart racing in sudden terror. Jasper's blade sliced through air dangerously close, his laughter echoing cruelly. "You think you're strong enough, widow?" Jasper sneered viciously, circling predatorily. "You'll always be weak." Suddenly, Takota appeared, intercepting Jasper's blade inches from Elizabeth's heart. They clashed violently, Two opposing forces, one representing vengeance, greed, and cruelty, the other honor, justice, and profound strength tempered by wisdom and loss. Elizabeth watched breathlessly, heart aching with gratitude yet fearful for Takota's life. Each strike between warriors was precise, controlled yet desperate. Takota fought not just for survival but for redemption, for himself, his people, for Elizabeth. Jasper lunged recklessly, his blade biting deep into Takota's shoulder. Takota grimaced in pain but swiftly countered, knocking Jasper to ground. Knife at the outlaw's throat, victory nearly secured. Jasper glared defiantly upward, daring Takota's mercy. "Finish it, savage!" he spat bitterly, eyes filled with contempt and hate. Elizabeth watched closely, breath held tight, understanding this moment's gravity. Justice or vengeance would define Takota forever. Takota's hand shook slightly, memories of past suffering briefly clouding his eyes. Elizabeth stepped forward gently, voice soft yet firm. "Takota," she whispered, eyes pleading softly yet confidently. "Don't become like him." Takota's gaze shifted slowly toward her, seeing clearly courage and empathy radiating deeply from Elizabeth's eyes. A long, tense silence passed, broken only by Jasper's harsh breathing. Finally, Takota withdrew slowly, leaving Jasper humiliated yet alive. "This mercy," Takota spoke quietly, voice powerful in restrained compassion, "you do not deserve. Remember it always." Jasper, defeated and humiliated, slinked backward into darkness, hatred smoldering, leaving Takota and Elizabeth alone beneath silent stars. Elizabeth approached carefully, touching Takota's wounded shoulder tenderly. He turned slowly, face softened by quiet gratitude. "Why spare him?" Elizabeth asked softly, sincere curiosity mingled deeply with admiration. Takota met her eyes solemnly. "Justice is stronger than vengeance. Violence consumes those who wield it recklessly." Elizabeth nodded slowly, profound understanding dawning clearly within her heart. Their bond, forged deeply through shared hardship, now solidified irrevocably. Word became unnecessary. Mutual respect and trust spoke volumes silently between them. Dawn soon approached, sky blushing softly pink, signaling endings and uncertain beginnings. Elizabeth and Takota returned slowly toward her burned homestead, standing quietly beside Ben's lonely grave. Elizabeth's fingers brushed softly against a concealed badge, symbolizing justice reclaimed painfully yet honorably. "Takota," Elizabeth began gently, voice trembling slightly with raw emotion, "you've shown me strength I never knew existed. I cannot repay that debt." Takota shook his head slowly, eyes tenderly understanding yet holding subtle sadness. "Strength was always within you," he affirmed quietly, sincerity deeply resonating. "I only reminded you." Elizabeth's gaze fell softly upon the grave, tears welling gently, yet heart strangely peaceful. "Do you believe we find peace after all we've lost?" she questioned softly, vulnerability clear yet beautiful. Takota's eyes turned thoughtfully skyward, considering carefully beneath rising dawn. "We find peace," he finally answered gently, "when we choose honor over despair." Elizabeth nodded solemnly, understanding profoundly his quiet wisdom. Their paths, briefly intertwined by tragedy and violence, now diverged naturally, each stronger for knowing the other deeply, each forever changed. Takota turned slowly, preparing respectfully to leave, yet paused, meeting Elizabeth's eyes once more, his expression quietly intense. "Remember," he offered softly, voice carrying deeply personal sincerity, "you are never alone now." Elizabeth smiled faintly, profoundly moved by quiet affection hidden within his simple words. "Nor are you," she answered warmly, sincerity gently mirrored. Takota nodded gently, allowing a faint, rare smile, a precious glimpse of quiet happiness, forged painfully yet beautifully between them. Silently, he vanished into Wyoming's wilderness, leaving Elizabeth standing peacefully beneath morning skies painted vividly by golden sunlight. She knelt softly beside Ben's grave, heart finally understanding clearly the quiet truth. Strength was not merely surviving hardships, but choosing compassion amidst overwhelming pain. Elizabeth rose gently, facing sunrise bravely, hope filling deeply within her chest. She had lost much, yet discovered profoundly precious truths: justice, compassion, trust, and quiet, resilient strength. Beneath endless skies stretching wide above Wyoming's frontier, Elizabeth Wells reclaimed life fully, forever honoring Ben's memory, forever changed by Takota's quiet strength, embracing redemption earned profoundly through blood, trust, and courage.